If you liked the video, feel free to subscribe. It would really help the channel. Thanks for watching. Thanks for stopping by. This video is going over 10 tips and tricks for the Salamanders using the Firestorm Assault Force Detachment. Firestorm Assault Force is not the best Space Marine detachment, but is also not the worst. It does have rules for torrent and melta weapons, making it feel like the Salamanders detachment, and it does have some rules for some transports as well. The tips and tricks for this video are Detachment Rule, Shooting or Combat, How to Start a Salamander's Army, Immolation Protocols and Crucible Battles, two of the stronger stratagems, How to use the Rapid Embarkation stratagem, Transports or no transports, Why is the Land Raider Redeemer so good for the Salamanders, Which enhancement should I use on my characters, Which characters should I use, and what are the top units for the Salamanders. We'll start with the Space Marine Army rule, Oath of Moment. In your command phase, you can select one enemy unit, and until your next command phase, any Adeptus Astartes unit from your army that targets that unit, you can re-roll the hit roll. As of the December Dataslate in 2024, any of these non-divergent chapters like the Salamanders, White Scars, Ultramarines also get +1 to the wound roll against their Oath of Moment target. The Firestorm Assault Force Detachment rule is Close Range Eradication. Ranged weapons equipped by Adeptus Astartes models from your army have the Assault ability, and each time an attack is made with such weapons that targets a unit within 12 inches, add 1 to the strength of that attack. This detachment rule gives all of our Adeptus Astartes models ranged weapons the Assault keyword. This means we can advance and shoot our entire army. This adds a lot of potential speed and shooting threat range. The army does not have any way to advance and charge through stratagems or enhancements in the detachment though. We do have ways to increase the melee damage, but the Firestorm Assault Force is more of a close to mid-range shooting army. This is a good question for building a list. We can build some decent melee heavy lists using Ajax and some of our more melee heavy generic characters. After all the lists I've played and built, the Salamanders using the Firestorm Assault Force are a shooting first army. The more we embrace that fact, the better our list will perform. We don't need to build a bunch of melee threat units. We can bring Ajax with some Blade Guard or some Assault Intercessors and then focus the rest of our points in ranged damage. We do have many shooting stratagems in the detachment, much more than melee combat stratagems. If you are looking to get heavy into Salamanders, build for ranged over combat. How to start a Salamander's army. The Salamanders are a strange army to build for. The detachment that is made for them revolves around units with torrent and melta weapons with transport support. Aggressors, Eradicators, Infernus Marines, Centurions, Assault Intercessors, and Blade Guard are all good units for the Salamanders. Impulsors and Repulsors with all their different variants are great transports for the Firestorm Assault Force as well. The good news is all of these units are usually in stock at GW or other retailers other than the Land Raider Redeemer. That one is a little bit difficult to find. The bad news is a lot of our good units do not come in any discount boxes together. The best we had was the old Blood Angels Combat Patrol, giving us 3 Aggressors, 1 Impulsor, 5 Intercessors, 5 Incursors, which I would usually kit bash into some Infiltrators or something else, and then 1 Librarian. Secondhand can be a good option, or people selling off spurs or models out of boxes they do not want. We only have 2 actual Salamanders characters, Vulcan Histan and Ajax Agaton. Both are fantastic in the Firestorm Assault Force. Immolation Protocols and Crucible of Battle. I want to mention these 2 stratagems since they are core damage dealing stratagems in the detachment. Aggressors with the Flamestorm Gauntlets really benefit from these 2 stratagems. They have twin-link torrent weapons to reroll their wounds for devastating wounds from the Immolation Protocol stratagems for 2 CP. Crucible Battle, we need to be within 6 inches to get that +1 to the wound roll and also be the closest eligible target, which once again pairs well with the aggressors since they have an ability that gives them +1 AP to ranged attacks that target the closest eligible target. Crucible Battle also works in the fight phase, a good choice for aggressors or the Blade Guard with Ajax in the fight phase. Try to keep in mind what units we may want to use this stratagem on while conserving our CP for these more powerful stratagems. These stratagems are the reason I like to have a Gravis Captain in my list. Next is a few tips on the Rapid Embarkation stratagem. There's 2 things we want to use this stratagem for. First, to keep our infantry units safe inside a tough transport. Remember, we can't use this if we have disembarked that unit this turn. it's good to help a unit that we deployed on foot safe after the transport's original cargo has disembarked. Say you had a Land Raider Redeemer with some aggressors inside, those aggressors jump out, but a unit that you started on foot, maybe Adrax and the Blade Guard, at the end of the fight phase, you would hop Adrax and the Blade Guard into that Land Raider Redeemer. It's great for keeping our hated Eradicators safe. We bring Eradicators in from reserves, shoot, and then at the end of the fight phase, we use Rapid Embarkation if we're close enough to a transport to hop those Eradicators inside that transport. The next thing we use it for is movement. Use this to jump inside a Land Raider at the end of the enemy fight phase, and then in our next turn, we drive up the board and then charge the unit out of the transport. Another clever thing we can do is use it for movement without moving it. We have an enemy infantry unit behind a wall on an objective 12 inches away from the front of our Land Raider. But we also need that Land Raider to stay where it is. Maybe it's on objective we want to hold. We also have Adrax and some Blade Guard who are within 6 inches behind the Land Raider. 1 CP, we embark at the end of the fight phase, and then in our turn, we disembark 3 inches towards that enemy unit. You move Adrax 6 inches, and then you charge. I've added some images here just to make it a little less confusing. Transports or no transports. This is more for those people who want to play Salamanders or try Salamanders, but do not own a lot of transports like the Land Raiders or multiple repulsor variants. The answer is yes. We may not have the transport support or the access to some of the transport-only stratagems. We still do have assault on all of our ranged weapons from the Detachment Rule, so our Adeptus Astartes infantry and vehicles can advance and shoot. We also will still have access to 2 of the more powerful stratagems in the Firestorm Assault Force, Crucible Battle for +1 to the wound roll, and Immolation protocols for devastating wounds with torrent weapons. So if you are curious about trying the Salamanders, even if you use some of your other Space Marines as proxies, but you don't have a lot of transports, you can play as Detachment and still do quite well with it. Why is the Land Raider Redeemer so good? Besides being a hard to kill transport, this is an anti-infantry nightmare. 2d6 plus 6 heavy flamer shots at strength 6, AP 2, damage 2, and their torrent ignoring cover. We could even use Vulcan Histan's ability to give the heavy flamer reroll wounds against a certain target. It can transport 14 models, 7 Gravis, Terminator, or Jetpack models, so it's perfect to fit 6 aggressors with a Gravis captain inside. Big reason this is good is the Overwatch stratagem. Place this in the center of the board, and then absolutely barbecue any enemy infantry who get within 12 inches of this Redeemer. In the Firestorm Assault Force, this Land Raider Redeemer will also have assault on all of its ranged weapons, so we can advance and then barbecue infantry. A great unit for the Salamanders. Even though it is expensive, I usually take at least one of these. What enhancements do I use? Champion of Humanity for a cheap 10 points is the best enhancement in the detachment. Having a unit that can ignore modifiers is very useful. It allows us to threaten those really tanky units like the Deathwing Knights or the Catan. We ignore those damage modifiers or even any of those Armor of Content abilities to either chop up or shoot those units off the board. Forged Fire, we can use this on Apothecary Biologist to join it with some Eradicators to get an auto hit or a save on 6. We could also use it during Overwatch to ensure we get at least 1 hit. Also a decent choice for the Captain and Gravis armor. Join with the aggressors to use the auto 6 as a save to add some survivability to the unit. For 15 points, this is my choice for the second best enhancement. War Tempered Artifice. We can make a Smash Captain with this enhancement, but we do not really have a lot of melee focused units other than the Blade Guard, Assault Intercessors, or the Terminators, but Adrax Agatone makes a better Smash Captain if you're looking for a high threat melee character. For 25 points, it is very pricey for +3 strength in the melee on one model. You can put it on your Gravis Captain to get his Power Fist up to strength 11, so you can bash out some vehicles, but for 25 points, it is still a bit pricey. The last one, Adamantine Mantle. We can put this on a Gravis Captain to half damage from his data sheet ability, then another -1 damage from this Adamantine Mantle, but only to a minimum of 1. For 20 points, this is not something I use that often though. Which characters do I use for the Salamanders? Vulcan Histan gives the army reroll the wounds with torrent and melta weapons versus 1 target per turn. He's great for holding an objective in no man's land, and he also gives the Infernus OC2 instead of OC1. He does make a decent melee threat as well. Adrax Agatone is a melee powerhouse. He gives his unit reroll the wound roll. His other ability halves the OC of enemy units within engagement range. It can come in clutch, but it's not as powerful as that reroll the wound roll ability. I do find it strange though that his giant Thunderhammer does not have devastating wounds when most other Thunderhammer weapons do have devastating wounds. Poor Ajax. Last up for a generic character is the Captain in Gravis armor. His Rites of Battle ability to reduce the cost of stratagems by 1 CP. He can join the aggressors to reduce that Immolation protocols, the devastating wound stratagem, from 2 CP to 1 CP. There is not really a must-have enhancement to put on the Gravis Captain. Fortune Battle can help the unit survive the ability with a auto 6 save per turn. You could also, like I said, put the Adamantine Mantle for some extra survivability just on him himself, but I would rather just save the points most of the time. That Refuse to Yield ability already has the incoming damage, so it does make it very hard to precision this Gravis Captain out of his unit. What are some of the top units for the Salamanders using the Firestorm Assault Force Detachment? First off, we have the Aggressors. Twin-linked Flamers are great for that Immolation Protocol stratagem for devastating wounds with torrent weapons. And then the Twin-linked Power Fist in melee, 3 attacks, AP 2, damage 2, so there is quite a bit of melee threat with these as well. Crucible Battle for 1 CP can be used in the shooting or the melee phase to add +1 to the wound. You attach a Gravis Captain to reduce the CP cost of those stratagems. The Eradicator Squad. The Detachment Rule brings the Meltas up to strength 10 when they're within 12 inches. Assault on the Meltas also gives us 6-inch more potential range on those Melta weapons. Reroll hits, wounds, and damage into vehicles and monsters from their datasheet ability. It is a bit harder to get these within 6 inches for that Crucible of Battle, but if we do, we will also be within Melta range, so it would be +1 to the wound and then Melta 2, and that would equal death to a lot of monsters or vehicles. Next up is a personal favorite of mine, the Blade Guard Veterans. Melee combat units with 4 attacks, strength 5, AP 2, damage 2. Ajax Agatome pairs great with them, giving them reroll the wound roll. They are also one of the few Space Marine infantry units that have a 4+ invulnerable save. Crucible of Battle once again for +1 to the wound roll is fantastic on these Blade Guards since they only have strength 5 weapons, so +1 to the wound roll, rerolling the wound roll with Ajax. These become quite deadly. You can add a lieutenant in there as well, with the enhancement Champion of Humanity to get the whole unit ignoring modifiers, lethal hits, and fallback in charge. Those are my 10 tips and tricks for the Salamanders Part 1. Let's finish the video with some final thoughts. I hope some of these tips and tricks were useful. They were generally aimed at newer players. Part 2 will have more advanced tips and tricks. The Firestorm Assault Force is not the worst detachment. It is a fun and fluffy detachment with some strengths in there. If you have any tips of your own, throw them in the comments. Right now, we need all the tips and tricks we can get. They haven't won a tournament in a while now, but they're still a really fun army to play. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe for weekly battle reports, list videos, and other Warhammer 40K content. Thanks for watching. Thanks for stopping by.